I've just been flirting with my new guests, and you'll be able to enjoy that too for the conversation that I'm about to have with Jodie Milton and Reece Stockhausen. They are relationship and intimacy coaches and co-creators of Practical Intimacy. They are married and use both their own relationship and a lot of study and experience with others to give fresh, clear, innovative, inspiring advice. I've been following them for a while on Instagram and recommend that you do too. I really think as relationship coaches, your reels are some of the finest. So a warm welcome to both of you.
Why, thank you. What an introduction.
My praise.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
Very juicy.
Yes, well, you're welcome. And we're actually going to dive into something that one of your reels inspired. But before we do, what would you like people to know about the two of you and what brings you to this conversation by way of having become relationship and intimacy experts? And in particular, I'd love to know what each of you did prior to this work.
So what I would like people to know about us, I think, is our mission and passion for raising the standard of relationships and marriage and long-term commitment. I feel like for a long time, it's been culturally acceptable to kind of bash your marriage or bash your relationship or your partner, like to take verbal digs and be like, yeah, marriage, the old ball and chain, or, the passion just fades and that's what it is. You've just got to get used to it. And I grew up hearing those sorts of messaging and felt like marriage was something to kind of be scared of. Long-term relationship was a hopeless journey. And it hasn't been that way for us. It's not that way for so many people I speak with. And I guess we want to change the conversation around that and kind of lift people's expectations and inspire people to know that your marriage can be wonderful.
The bar is set incredibly low culturally for marriage, I think, and something that's become really apparent to us through doing the work of deepening our marriage, of really sorting out a lot of our relationship shit, moving through a lot of our intimacy blocks, is that marriage gets to be awesome. And that's kind of the message that's really present for us at the moment, that we're just really trying to embody in our own marriage, but in our work with couples as well. It's like your marriage, your long-term relationship, it gets to be awesome. Yeah.
And before this work, I have a background in international relations and politics. So I was very passionate about politics, but it was also a very different kind of world. I didn't feel like the heart was there. I didn't feel like the love was there. It's couldn't be further from that, in fact. And then eventually went into education and was teaching Japanese. So a very big career pivot for us to come into this work.
I've worn many hats in my work before doing this. A DJ, electronic music producer. I've worked in energy sustainability, all kinds of different stuff. But it wasn't until I started moving into this work over a decade ago that I really had found my calling and really what I was put here on the earth to do.
Okay, that's so interesting to me to hear what each of you have done previously, because in that, I don't hear anything that would have included the kind of professional environment that the two of you share with one another, both because of your focus on relationships and also being in business with one another. Is that something that also was challenging, or as you work on your marriage, did you find that being in business together kind of followed whatever was happening in your marriage? So if you were working on your marriage, being co-creators of your company, Practical Intimacy, was more straightforward. That was a little, not the most elegant way to ask the question, but I think you know what I'm after.
Our business grew out of our relationship, and our relationship was a very conscious choice. When we first met, we were pretty jaded about relationships, and we really never intended to stay together. It was like, he's cute, let's have a little summer fling. Like, there's this amazing connection, absolutely, but I didn't think it could last. And when we started to spend more time together and, hearts have a way of, changing plans, we realized, okay, this has depth and potential, but we don't have the skills actually to feel confident about this succeeding long term. We want to create an amazing relationship, but we don't know how to do that. So all of the study that we did around relationships was really for our relationship first. And then once we had a few years of studying, we studied Tantra in India, we took courses from the Gottman Institute, we studied a wide range of modalities, and then went, oh, actually, maybe we could share this with others. And with my teaching background, that felt so natural to me. And you had done a lot of work in the personal development world. It just felt like the right fit. And originally, it's a funny story, we actually were going to have separate businesses. And it wasn't until someone sat us down and he's like, why are you having separate businesses? You working with women in their relationship and, you working with men in their relationship. Why don't you do that together? And it was such a ridiculous aha moment.
Right there in front of us.
So obvious. And that's when we realized, yeah, okay, we do want to launch this as a relationship business and we want to do it together. And working with you is awesome.
It definitely has its challenges.
It does. It does.
It adds such an incredible dimension to our marriage that we get to do this work by ourselves, on ourselves, with each other, in our marriage, and with other people as well. It's very complicated in that way, but also very fulfilling.
Yeah.
You, Jodie, created a reel on passionate sex, and I really appreciate your approach because I think it's very easy to think that passionate sex is about new positions, the Kama Sutra, new sex toys, acrobatics, and that's all great. I'm not against any of that, but it's not, in my opinion, what actually creates the most fulfilling, gratifying, erotically expansive experiences. And I really enjoyed hearing how, I'm going to assume the two of you, not because I think you're identical people, but this is having heard Jodie in this reel. If you have a different position, Reece, and let's hear that too. But I would love for you to just share how you define passionate sex, because it's not a voice in the world that's very loud, this approach to passionate sex, which I share with you. So how would you define it?
I think in defining it, I mean, the question was for you. So
Okay, sure. All right.
Well, it's for both of you. This is the thing with interviews on Zoom, that it's not always so clear which one I'm looking at, and I'm being very intentional in leaving it open-ended because I assume there are particular questions one of you likes to answer or the other. So please just lead yourselves in that regard.
For us, the core of passionate sex is about feeling chosen and wanted by your partner. And I think culture has a way of saying what that equals, and it has kind of put us into a rut of thinking what we see in movies. Passionate sex is hard and fast, where you're tearing each other's clothes off and you just stick it right in, right? Because you want each other so much. That's what passion is. And that can be a form of passion. We'll come back to that in a moment, because there's so many things that are problematic with the way that sex is portrayed in the media. But really, at the core of it is it's about feeling like your partner really wants you, chooses you, wants to be with you, and you're there experiencing sex as an expression of that, as that expression of your desire and want and choice for each other.
I think it's also important to define what it's not at the same time. So it's not outcome focused in terms of getting to the penetration part or getting to orgasms and ejaculations. It's not performative. You spoke just before, Alexandra, about like new positions and trying new things. It's like, cool, it can include that. But very often that's more about the performance of sex and what it looks like, and trying to emulate or live up to cultural ideas or expectations about what passion should look like from the outside. The problem with those external expressions of passion is that they don't speak to any of the internal experience of how each person is actually feeling in that experience and what they're desiring to express with one another.
The word passion, at least in the context of a conversation with intimacy coaches, can so often be understood to mean something related to sex and sensuality. And I didn't look up the exact definition of passion before this conversation, but just hearing you talk, it's reminding me like there are incredible pieces of music called passion, right? The St. Matthew's Passion. There are various passions of that sort, and they really are about death and just like the intensity of experience. And of course, we use passion more casually too, where it's like being passionate about life is just being really into it and fully embodying it and alive. And it isn't so much about something specific, it's about radiating and navigating internally that kind of juicy enthusiasm. And I know that I'm like conveying this in my tone of voice more, but when I hear you talk, I'm just really reminded of something I say often, which is what makes for great sex is how you feel. It's not what you're doing, it's how you feel. And when we are so focused on what we're doing, those really extraordinary feelings are often unavailable.
I love what you just shared there, because as you mentioned, passion is deep feeling and intensity. And when you frame it in that way, it also kind of puts the opportunity or the power back into your own hands. In that, I think sometimes when we think about passionate sex, there can be this feeling of, well, someone else needs to do that for me and to me. And I need them to bring the passion. I want them to grab me. I want them to bring that fire, again, because of how we see it portrayed. But what you were just sharing there, it's about this depth of feeling and aliveness. And that's not just how you're showing up in the bedroom, but that is how are you showing up in your life? How are you filling your cup? What does ignite you and bring you alive? That's a passion for life that also brings passion to the bedroom. And that is something that you can do for yourself and for your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And so adding to what you said, Reece, about what passionate sex is not, it is not sexual activity, which is a chore, a duty, or a burden in any way, because doing it for the other person, I mean, that can be a part of it, but that is, if that is really driving what's happening or that anything is happening, that inherently is not going to be passionate sex. Passionate sex is not transactional in any way, transactional in the sense that, if I do this, then you do that. There's this crazy statistic. I'm always a little suspicious because I don't really know how these statistics are gathered. And it was from a women's magazine, not a medical journal, but something in some survey somewhere, 84% of women said that they had used sex to get household chores done. And there's no question that those sexual experiences were not passionate in the way that we're talking about. It includes a goallessness and a kind of timelessness too, that you're just open to the experience without any kind of ulterior or overt agenda. So it's worth just defining that, of course, because otherwise the input on passionate sex does come from the movies, comes from porn, and it can include farting and drooling and like all kinds of things because you're not so carefully monitoring all of the impressions. It's not that those things need to be part of passionate sex, but they sometimes are just the natural outcome of being so free, so present, and so fully taken over with the delicious feeling. So I love so much that you have a recipe for creating this. And the thing that I like about your recipe that we're going to get into now is that the only ingredients are showing up and wanting to make passionate sex or make passionate love, whatever, that there aren't any other fancy ingredients. And so as you are listening, there's going to be something in the list of ingredients that you can absolutely apply, whether you used to have passionate sex and you're wondering how to get back to that, or you're having pretty good passionate sex and you're thinking about how can I dial this up? How can I feel more? How can I invite my partner to feel more the next time we're making love? And also, if you feel like you've never experienced passionate sex, this recipe is for wherever you are, as long as you're bringing the ingredients of wanting to feel more passion and being willing to be vulnerable and find new ways to get there. So, assuming we have these ingredients, what is one of the recipes for passionate sex that you would like to share?
One of my favorites is slowing down. So again, to speak to the way that passionate sex is portrayed in the media, it's quick, it's intense, there is no foreplay. We're just in this moment of culmination, we kiss, and then she hitches her skirt, he sticks it in, and then they orgasm, and that's it. Yeah, it's so quick. Passionate sex can be fast, but there's so much to discover in slowing down. And we also do know that for the most part, women do need a lot more warming up, that just jumping to penetration is not pleasurable, that our bodies do need a lot more time to warm up in order to really fully be aroused, in order for us to be ready for penetration. Not to mention, sex doesn't have to be penetration, right? There's all of these other activities that we can enjoy and savor, but we need to slow down in order for that to happen.
Yeah, and I think to drive that home, I just want to add, I have not personally been on set while porn was being filmed, but my understanding is that it's just common in the industry that women may use a vibrator by themselves for 45 minutes just before filming begins. And so it's just totally artificial. Even when it's real bodies doing it in porn, there has been, whether it's slow and luxurious or another flavor, there has been lots and lots of preparation before those experiences can be filmed.
The act of slowing down has an inherent vulnerability to it. When we're rushing, when we're focused on outcomes, there is that intensity to it, but there's so much happening in our bodies that when we do take the time to slow down and get a little more present, and presence could be another one of the ingredients for passionate sex, is that when we slow down and like really start to feel into what's going on in our bodies, where we're at internally, emotionally, where our mind is at, we have to get a lot more naked, not just physically, but emotionally naked in that way. Because when we do become more present to what's going on, we can't avoid it then. We have to be present with what's present in that moment. And being in that state of being with one another is part of what creates more of that connection between us. And I think we could also like substitute the word passionate in passionate sex for connected sex. Connected sex can have such a different variety and a different array of flavors, whether that's fast and intense and passionate, or whether that is slow, seductive, connected. They all get to count as passionate, connected sex.
Yeah, because really bringing our integrated selves is another element here, that if we're moving so quickly, almost like skimming on the surface, then we're not accessing the complicated, perhaps ambivalent, grief-filled, and also luscious feelings below the waterline, which are, of course, essential for passionate sex. So I'm so glad you named the vulnerability. All right, well, honestly, we clearly could do a whole podcast episode on each of the recipes, but let's keep going to one of the next things besides presence and slowing down.
Another really important piece is prioritizing emotional intimacy. So again, if passionate sex is about feeling chosen and wanted and connected, then prioritizing your emotional connection and really spending time with your partner to connect is crucial. And again, a lot of women will report that when there's more emotional intimacy in their relationship, they have more desire for sex. And there's even been research that shows a really measurable correlation that a moment of strong emotional connection will lead to 90 minutes of increased desire. And then after 90 minutes, that sexual desire starts to fade. So it tells us how important constantly prioritizing emotional connection actually is.
That's so interesting. I hadn't heard the 90-minute window. It's like there's the golden hour in treating trauma. This is like the golden hour and a half for something else. Does that mean we should, I mean, in your view, like go through some kind of emotionally connecting activity as a form of foreplay explicitly? Because I definitely believe that emotional intimacy is a prerequisite for sexual, sensual intimacy in the context of a long-term relationship. I don't, that can be true, but it isn't necessarily true when it comes to a one-night stand or early in dating. But certainly it's a prerequisite in the context of a long-term relationship. And so I have always thought about maintaining the emotional intimacy throughout the day, but do you guide couples to do a particular specific kind of emotional connection ritual as, you know, like get the bedroom ready and start your emotional connection exercise?
The answer to that is both. Ideally, what we've created in our marriage and what we guide other couples to create is a base level of everyday emotional intimacy. So there is that continued sense of connection. There's that sense of safety. There's that continued sense of we're both caretaking each other, constantly checking in with where we're at, caretaking the relationship, and just really helping to guide the connection on an everyday level. And that's going to include, addressing conflict, addressing unresolved arguments. So it may be that before sex, there are clearing conversations, there are specific rituals or connection activities that are specific to the couple that they can engage in to just help them get on the same page in that way, which makes both men and women open for sex. Yeah, I think that's a sort of big myth that we need to call out here, is that women need emotional intimacy first before they can have sexual intimacy, and for men it's sex. I've actually found that both are true for both men and women. There are women who don't need that emotional intimacy, who can get the emotional intimacy from sex, and vice versa with men, men who need that emotional intimacy before moving into sexual intimacy.
A really simple practice that we'll use, and we do encourage our clients to use as well, is appreciation. And we kind of build this in. If we are feeling a little bit disconnected, we'll sit and eye gaze and share appreciations back and forth, but really heartfelt appreciations, not like, hey, thanks for taking out the trash, that was cool.
Which is a perfectly good place to start. If
Absolutely.
someone is not in the habit of deeper appreciation, like that's its own skill set. So if you have it, by all means drop in and let's hear what your example is. But I want to be really clear, if you're not in the habit of expressing appreciation, thank you for taking out the trash is a great place to start.
Well, what we would add to it, because that's actually a really common appreciation in our marriage, because I don't like bin germs. They really gross me out. And the fact that I never have to take out the trash, because Reece always does that, brings so much wonderful joy to my life and freedom. So what I might say instead of, hey, thanks for taking out the trash, is, hey, thank you for taking out the trash, because it really helped me come home and feel like the house was in order. And that took a really big weight off my shoulders. I suddenly wasn't thinking about all of the to-dos. And I felt like you were thinking about our home and thinking about our family and thinking about what we needed. And I felt caretaken. So it's just going that little bit deeper, sharing how it impacts you, why it's meaningful to you. Sometimes the best appreciations look really simple on the surface, but there's a universe within them.
As you modeled that, Jodie, I'm realizing that everything that you've said so far about passionate sex pertains when expressing appreciation, being present, slowing down, feeling more, building the emotional connection, the ingredients to depth of appreciation, or the recipe, as I've been saying, it's the same as for passionate sex. And I highlight that because you can cultivate these things while expressing appreciation and then tap into them with sex if it feels a little confronting to just go for these things in the sexual context if you're not in the habit already.
It's a really beautiful analogy because one of the other ingredients that we talk about is expressing your want for each other. So really vocalizing, I want you, I appreciate you, I enjoy you, you taste good, that feels yummy, like in the bedroom. But with an appreciation, it's the same thing. We often think these thoughts. I appreciate you, you bring so much to my life, you're so inspiring, you're so clever, I love whatever the things are, and we forget to say them. All these little micro opportunities to appreciate our partner. And in the bedroom, all of these yummy sensations and things we're experiencing, but if we don't share them, there's a missed connection opportunity there.
Because we get to share in those then. When you share it with me or when I share it with you, that gets to be an experience that's not just happening inside of me, but it's happening between us together.
And in sex, it really helps us to stay present too. Like most women, my mind can wander during sex. It can be hard to stay present. And for me, especially back when we first got together, this was a real game changer for me, realizing that making sound and talking and expressing really helped me to stay present and connected, and helped me to be more in the sexual experience, less in my head or like less spectatoring, and more in my body and in the experience, and more connected. Because the more connected I feel, the more present I am. And but previously, to me, talking during sex was very scary. That was not something I ever felt comfortable doing.
Well, no, because the moment's supposed to just take you.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to talk. Talking is clunky and awkward because, talking is clunky and awkward, and that's okay.
So were you always open to talking, Reece? One of my reasons for asking the question is my husband just found any kind of talking, especially that he might have to do, so distracting. For years, it's like it would take him out of the physicality and essentially the gratification of the experience. As a man devoted to his own growth, he has really expanded, and that is not the case anymore. But it really was for years, and I needed to think, well, am I being selfish, or is it that he's shut down and so it would be good for him too to be expressing? Like this is a whole both universal and personal inquiry. So I just wonder, was speaking during sex always something that you easily accessed?
It depends how we're defining speaking.
Okay.
So on one hand, I guess I wasn't that kind of archetypal man in terms of I'm just here to do my thing and take my woman. I was very comfortable with talking about this is what's working, this is what's not working, what do you like, here's what I like. That came very naturally to me in terms of just a way of expressing and communicating and connecting emotionally. Where it was challenging for me and the growth edge that I absolutely had to lean into was more of the sort of explicit dirty talk arena. I was more of like the nice guy in the bedroom. Like, it's all about pleasing you, and it's not about me, but we can talk about things and it's okay, and it's all very nice and it's all very pleasant and pleasurable. But when it came to that more like explicitly erotic, dirty, I call it like the fuck energy, just that real
primal.
primal beast. That was the area for me that was like, whoa, no, like I'm a nice guy. I'm not one of those guys. Like that's the energy that's responsible for all of the hideous patriarchy stuff in the world. I'm not like that. It took a lot of self-development work for me to begin tapping into that in a really healthy way, to find the beauty and the love and the authentic power in that, and to get more comfortable expressing that aspect of me in the bedroom.
It's really awesome. And it's actually a great segue to the question that I haven't asked all couples recently, all guests recently, but I used to and I want to again. It just slipped my mind. So, because intimate relationships are really the ultimate vehicle for personal growth, I would love to ask, well, I'll start with you, Reece. What have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Jodie?
Wow, awesome question. Yeah. What I just spoke about is definitely one that's super high on that list. It had been such a huge growth edge for me, a part of myself that I was absolutely terrified of. The opportunity that this relationship and being with Jodie has given me to really step up and step into that aspect of myself, and how much confidence, power, authenticity, well-roundedness that has allowed me to evolve into is like literally mind-blowing and incredible to me. So that's the first thing. I want to add one other thing. The sense of playfulness and joy and lightness that this sparkly being has helped inspire in me. Again, I didn't really know that I was missing that previously in my life until I'd had that, I guess, activated within me, and an opportunity to really explore fun, play, adventure, all of that light sparkliness. And yeah, just how transformative that's been for me.
Real cheeky side that like only I get to see.
Mischievous.
Yeah, that you hadn't quite met apparently, but he was there.
So good. Well, thank you for that, Reece. That feels beautiful to hear. Jodie, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Reece?
I learned how much my perfectionism was preventing me from having a fulfilling life. And the way I learned that through relationship was when we hit conflict and difference, and when Reece didn't behave the way I thought he should, or the way that I would, or do it the way that I thought was right, I wanted to cut and run. Right? I have a real avoidant attachment style. I'm definitely that island type. And I remember a moment where it just dawned on me, like I just had this aha moment of just how much I was cutting myself off from the depth and realness of human experience, and specifically relationship. Like if we just have to be perfect all the time and do everything right, and my way is the right way and you need to get on board, how rigid I was being. And so this relationship has helped me to soften and to challenge my own perfectionist tendencies and to be more humble. And this shows up all the time working together creatively, because we do a lot of creative work together. We write blogs together. We'll script reels together. We'll create our courses together. We have different opinions when we're working with couples. We have to collaborate. And so I need to be able to embrace another way of being, and then also recognize where I'm getting caught up in my own rigid perfectionist thinking. So all of that has just helped me to be kinder to myself, to enjoy the amazing relationship that I have, satisficing, which is a concept I really love, making the most of this and learning how to truly be satisfied with what is, as opposed to being, the hungry ghost that is never fulfilled. And that's just meant that all of life is better.
Yay.
Yay. Good job. And so much more.
Well, thank you. each of you answered with something that's both so personal and so vivid and universal also. So thank you for that. For listeners who are intrigued and want to lean in and follow you, follow up with you, what's the best way to find you?
Our website is the best place to find us, which is just practicalintimacy.com, one word. There you can find a bunch of really great blogs. We're mad, passionate, keen bloggers. We love writing. We love sharing really in-depth articles that help people make change in their lives. You can also find an intimacy quiz, which is designed to help you discover your intimacy style in order to create more connection, more depth, just a lot more intimacy in your relationship. You can find out about our courses and our online coaching.
And we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we are on Facebook. So you can also follow us on the socials, Practical Intimacy.
Sounds wonderful. And I really appreciate the two of you joining me for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for asking such beautiful, deep, real questions, intimate questions.
My pleasure.